should I start? Part of me wants to start here, because today I woke up next to Lyre River in northern Washington, made a cup of tea, and explored around the river. I have been thinking about coming back to this place for so long, and part of me thought that it would never happen. But no, maybe I should start here instead, because 2 weeks ago, Katie and I moved out of our apartment in Calgary, quit our jobs, and packed up our lives and headed out onto the biggest adventure of both of our lives. But that is not quite right either. Let's instead start here, 2 years ago, because in September of 2022, Katie and I did the impossible. Okay, that's a little dramatic. In 2022, Katie and I went on a road trip, a really big road trip in our tiny Toyota Matrix. And at the time, it really felt like we really were doing the impossible. We were college dropouts with no money and wanted to go on an adventure in whatever means that we could. And it was amazing. It was so amazing that I actually have a 25-minute long video about how amazing it was. So you can check that out after this video if you want. But it was also very hard. Believe it or not, Toyota Matrixes are not meant to be slept in, especially by 2 people and all of their belongings. The sleeping arrangement was only one of many challenges that occurred as a result of our spontaneous and ambitious goal to travel across all of America. Our car broke down, we got lost, we slept in Walmart, we had many sleepless nights, and we ran out of money way quicker than either of us thought we would, and with that, we had to cut the trip short. And what felt like it should have been our grand, victorious return to Calgary after conquering the world actually felt like us stumbling over the finish line, gasping for air. And at the time, I owed my parents approximately $5,000. I was in debt to my school about $15,000. I didn't have a job and was crashing at Katie's parents' house with her while her parents were away. During this time, we ate pretty much exclusively canned food for a few weeks so we could save a bit of money and plan what was next. And it was also at this point that I developed a huge amount of anxiety about doing anything at all. We were going so fast on the trip to nothing. I could barely drink a caffeinated tea without feeling like I was on the verge of a panic attack. And that may sound a little dramatic, but I was just not myself for a long time after coming back. We were also in Calgary. Calgary, oh how I fucking hate Calgary, with its gray brutalist buildings, dead trees, and negative 30-degree weather. We weren't supposed to end up in Calgary. We were supposed to be in Vancouver, Victoria, Toronto, Montreal, anywhere but here. But when you have no money, and I really had no money, you can't just start moving. But over the next month of being in Calgary, Katie and I came up with a plan, a new trip. The road trip we did in September, as hard as it was the coolest thing that either of us had ever done. And as soon as we were able to, we had to do it again. But this time was going to be different. We weren't going to drive in some rinky-dink tiny Toyota Matrix. We were going to go in a truck, a big one, and we were going to put a camper on it, a home on wheels. And this time we are going to make much more time for ourselves, to allow ourselves to really breathe it in. We're going to save enough money, we're going to budget, to plan, to make spreadsheets with boring data about campgrounds, make lists of things we wanted to pack. We were going to live out of our camper for 5 months while traveling down the West Coast, the right way. So over the next 2 years, we both worked our asses off. We got an apartment, we both got jobs, we bought that truck and camper that we were dreaming about and began to renovate our new home on wheels. We got to hang out with friends and family, do small adventures to the mountains and to the ocean, but all the while we kept our dream of the trip in mind. And about a year into living in Calgary, we had a date in mind. June 1st, 2024. And in that last year of living in Calgary, oh, did we barely make it to that date. Because after a brutally long Canadian winter, when all the snow was melted, we found ourselves 30 days away from our trip with a truck that couldn't start and a camper that was half gutted, barely renovated, with black mold and holes everywhere. Okay, let's start with the truck. A year prior to the trip, Katie and I deliberated over what kind of truck we wanted to take on the trip. A mid-2000s Toyota Tacoma was my initial pitch, because after we survived the last 20,000 kilometer road trip in our Toyota, I was inclined to trust them again. But then one day, as I was at work, Katie texted me a picture of this truck, a 1994 Ford F-250 XLT Turbo. And my initial reaction was, no. Are you kidding me? We cannot buy a 30-year-old truck to do a road trip in. It was also a gas guzzler and would definitely cost us close to double in gas mileage over our trip. But over time, Katie convinced me, and I have to admit that the coolness factor was there. I love the way this truck looks and runs. It is massive too, and can carry pretty much any kind of camper that you throw at it. So we both said, fuck it, and bought it. And for a while, everything seemed like it was going great. But a few months before we left, the truck still had one major issue. It was stuck in fourth gear and was, for all intents and purposes, undrivable. Now, add on top of that Katie's dad had already tried several different fixes to this problem, all to no avail, and he was a car guy. Even if it magically fixed itself, what would happen if it failed again while we were on the road with only Katie and I, the furthest thing from car guys? So now let's move on to the camper. There's really one rule that you should have when you buy an old camper, and that is, don't buy one with leaks. But the truck didn't look too leaky when we bought it, and unfortunately for us this time, Katie and I had to learn this lesson the hard way. And because of a variety of problems with this camper, one of them being a large area of black mold that was growing in the corner of our bed, Katie and I had procrastinated working on it the summer before. And a month before us leaving, the camper was not even close to being livable, with half-done paint jobs, holes in the ceiling, floor, and spiders everywhere looking to settle into their new permanent home. The other fun fact about campers is hidden within these beautiful looking metal poles on the side. These hydraulic jacks are notorious for breaking down, leaking fluid, and becoming generally unusable. Now, because of this, new jacks, or even working jacks, are worth more than the camper itself, and are also very hard to find. We had 2 working jacks at that time that we had somehow managed to lower onto these sawhorses the summer before, but lifting up the camper was a whole other impossible task. So now we're back to being 30 days away from our trip, and I gotta ask you, what would you do in this scenario? Postpone the trip? Cancel the trip? Literally buy a whole new truck and camper that are actually functioning? Well, we did none of those things, as we put our heads down and went to work. Now, I say we, but honestly, most of the fixes done to both the camper and the truck were the result of others' handiwork. Either way, we painted inside the camper, we sawed out and put in new wood in our bed, we closed up the holes all over the camper, and I swear to God, literally on the day before we left, finally finished setting everything up within the camper. And as for the jacks, well, a few days before we left, we somehow heaved the camper onto the truck using the cantilever method. As for the truck, miraculously, we got a mobile mechanic to come to the truck, and it turns out it was just a fuse that was no longer working. A cheap, simple fix to something that we thought was going to kill the trip entirely. All the while, in this last month, we packed up our apartment, quit our jobs, recorded the last videos to upload while I was on the road, said some emotional goodbyes to friends and family members, and finally, and I really mean it, finally, we hit the road. A dream 2 years in the making, finally coming to fruition. So now I'm sitting here in Lyre River, 2 weeks into our trip, at a campground that I stayed in 2 years ago, staring at a wood log hanging across a river, one that I walked across 2 years ago today. And it's pretty cool, and definitely very lucky how things ended up working themselves out. And I can't wait to see what's next. Wow. So this is going to be a bit of a change from my normal sitting down and talking to the camera about stuff in the world right now type videos. And I still might do a little bit of those type of videos, but I also want to be incorporating some of the stories about this really big, meaningful trip that Katie and I are embarking on. I have so many ideas for this channel, so Please, if you can do all the annoying YouTube things of liking, subscribing, commenting, whatever, I'll see you guys again very soon.